I became a part of this committee that was doing a Martin Luther King celebration. And I'm like, yeah, I'll volunteer to speak. And I had like 5 minutes to talk. And I was a nervous wreck thinking about it. And I even read a poem and invited people to close their eyes while I read it because then they weren't looking at me. But I got off the stage after that 5 minutes and I went, that was amazing. That was exhilarating. Like there was something in me that even though it was, nerve wracking for sure, that went, this is yours to do. And so, yeah, that's what compelled me to go forward.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio & Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Robin Ferguson. Robin is a certified master coach, certified by the International Coaching Federation, and the owner of R.A. Ferguson Coaching and Consulting, LLC. She is a registered nurse, a former minister, and has held several other coaching and leadership roles. She received nursing training from the University of Central Missouri, religious training from Unity Institute and Seminary, and a master's degree in organizational development psychology from Avila University. She has written a book named The Phoenix Effect. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Robin.
Robin, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. You're like a true Renaissance woman, nurse, minister, executive coach, author, painter. You've done it all. I mean, you're just, you're the modern day, I don't know the female version of Leonardo da Vinci, but you're kind of in that category.
Oh, wow. What a comparison. Thank you. Yeah, I love to embrace life in all its forms. So if something interests me, I'm like, let's try it out. Yeah.
And we weren't formally introduced, but there was two people, the famous or maybe infamous Michael Mackey, and then the great Mike Allison.
Yeah.
So grateful that they kind of sent you my way. So, but I know you're fairly active on social media and been on a lot of podcasts and are out there. But what one thing would surprise people about you, Robin?
I think that, when people first meet me, they think, that I'm a more conservative presence, especially with my minister background. But I do have kind of a wild side. So I think that's always, as people get to know me, they realize that, she's she's a risk taker and an innovator. And so, yeah.
Yeah. What was the most wild thing you've done at a party?
Ooh, I don't know if I can share that. There's other people involved. Let's see, what can I share at a party? I mean, I as my process in life, as I've learned to be comfortable in my own skin, one of the things I decided to do was find a nude beach down in Florida, and I'm like, if I'm gonna do this and accept all of me, then here we go. So that was one of the more wild side things. But yeah, I've done a lot of, I'm very interested in other cultures and have done some rituals with Native Americans and some dancing around a fire and some of those things that I feel like I love people, and they fascinate me. And so the more I can learn about other belief systems and other ways of thinking and other perspectives, I think the more it grows me as a human being.
I think you grew up in Chicago.
Yeah, I was born in Chicago, so I moved quite a bit as a kid. So I left there at 3, but have strong connections. Most of my family's back there, but yeah, I actually moved around most of my childhood. So my mom, it was her second marriage, so I have an older brother and sister, but I didn't grow up with them. So I grew up as an only child who moved all the time due to some issues my dad had. So I was always the new kid in school. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I'd been to 4 different schools. I'm a Midwestern girl, so Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Louis, and now Kansas City is where I call home.
What was fun for you growing up? What did you love doing as a child?
Yeah, I think because I spent a lot of time alone, I had a deep imagination. So I would just imagine, different things. I had a group of stuffed animals that were my audience that I would speak to or teach to or whatever, even preach to. I think I was 10 when I decided that, I needed to. Got this idea of being a preacher that has served me well in my life, is to have that deep imagination that allows me to think outside the box and help people be innovative and that kind of thing.
So you had aspirations like when you were 10, 11, whatever the age was, to be a minister?
Yeah, it was certainly something that crossed my radar. I was in a pretty conservative tradition at the time. And so the minister was asking us in one of our classes, like what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I said, I wanted to be a minister. And he said, well, it's not really possible for women in this tradition, but, maybe someday. So I tucked that away. And
Wow.
didn't go away. I was always kind of a deeply spiritual kid, asking, the questions other kids weren't asking, like, what's the meaning of life and why is there suffering and that kind of thing. So I think that spiritual part has always been there and has continued to live in me, and it's what grounds me.
And if I recall correctly from our coffee that we had back in, I think, early December, I know you're a certified Strength Finders coach, but one of your top 5 strength is connectedness.
Yeah.
I want to say.
It makes sense,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We share that one. So I thought that was you. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So of course you go to nursing school because you wanted to be a minister. Was that the path?
Well, it wasn't the intended path, but I'm somebody who has never had like long-term goals in terms of, where I want to be in 5 year, 10 years. I really live by my gut and my intuition. And so if something feels right, then I walk through that door and I trust that it's taking me somewhere, and it's served me well in my life. And there's nothing wrong with having goals, but I think that openness to opportunities that show up is really important. And so, yeah, I was in high school getting ready to visit colleges and didn't know what I wanted to do, and picked up a book by an oncology nurse and read it. And I was like, that's it. And so I think what's the common thread has always been that I want to uplift humanity in some way. And so started out as a pediatric nurse in the NICU and did that for quite a while, and worked with anywhere from newborn infants all the way up to teens. And then, decided one day that I was going to seminary.
About what you said about long-term goals. So, as an executive coach, are you, because I think I'm not going to say struggled, but waffled on goal setting versus, just being doing the work every day and seeing what that work is. Not that you don't have goals that you want to, obviously I'm launching my podcast every week and I want to get into public speaking and things like that. But I'm like, I've done it all different ways where you set, the plan and I want to be this and I visualize and all that. But I would maybe just clarify your thoughts around, and I know you're talking about yourself, but maybe talk about yourself and as it applies to some of your executive clients also.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with having goals, but what happens a lot of times is if you set a goal for yourself, you become so fixated on what's the path to get to that particular thing that you miss the opportunities that show up around you that might take you in a different direction. And so it's kind of that idea of the person on the roof who's, praying for to be saved from the flood, and a boat comes by and they're like, no, God will save me. And then a helicopter comes by and they're like, no, God will save me. And they end up dying. And God says, well, I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter. so so it's
Right.
this idea that if we're going to have a goal, we have to stay open. We have to stay open to the possibilities that show up, and we have to look at, is this something that feels right for me? And maybe it's going to take me in an entirely different direction than I expected to go. And can you allow yourself to play in that possibility and see where it takes you?
We have nurses in our family, and it's a great profession. In terms of your personality, and it just, for me, just understanding that somebody's a pediatric nurse, just seeing those babies and young kids, what was that like for you on a daily basis?
I was probably 22 years old, and I had a baby that was born premature, drug addicted mom. So there was no family around. She'd already checked herself out. And he had too many things going on that were incompatible with life. And so my assignment that day was to take him into a quiet room and rock him as he died. And so I spent
Wow.
8 hours with that infant in my arms, going from, the human reaction that, of course, you would have about, why is this happening? What's the purpose here? This beautiful infant is, nobody cares that, he's alive, and being angry about the whole situation. And then, as I just sat with him and looked into his face, which was, his perfect looking little baby, I thought, there's got to be a reason here. There's got to be some purpose. And, throughout that 8 hours, I really sat with this idea of life and death and our purpose in life. And it really had obviously a lifelong impact on me. And I felt like he was a teacher for me. He was a master teacher. And that he helped me come to terms with the beauty in the process of dying, and that there is, for me, something more going on than just what we see with our human experience. And so, yeah, he's been a teacher that's lived with me my whole life. And so maybe he was only alive 2 days, but wow, what an impact he had. And it really taught me that, we have these moments in life where we can have an impact on someone. And they may be brief, and it may be in the grocery store. It may be, filling our car up with gas, whatever. We have these brief moments where we can have a positive impact in somebody's life. And, if a premature baby that was alive 2 days had a lifelong impact on me, like what opportunities exist for us to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a gift. And wow. What was the point, Robin, in your nursing career that you thought, okay, well, I've learned what I needed to learn here, and now it's time to kind of fulfill my childhood dream, I guess, of being a minister?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have been a nurse the rest of my life. I loved what I did. But like I said, I always had this kind of deep yearning for understanding life at a deeper level. And so it was a process. First it was my own spiritual journey, and I really studied a lot of different religious traditions and embraced kind of a positive spirituality in my own life, and found a tradition that really supported that and fit that for me. And one day was sitting there, thinking about what I wanted to do. And one of the questions that a mentor of mine had asked was, how do you want to contribute to the world? And it just sort of came as an awareness that this is what I need to do. And it's funny because I had never done any public speaking. I'd never even taken a speech class. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to get up in front of an audience. And so I became a part of this committee that was doing a Martin Luther King celebration. And I'm like, yeah, I'll volunteer to speak. And I had like 5 minutes to talk. And I was a nervous wreck thinking about it. And I even read a poem and invited people to close their eyes while I read it, because then they weren't looking at me. But I got off the stage after that 5 minutes and I went, that was amazing. That was exhilarating. Like there was something in me that even though it
Yeah.
was, nerve wracking for sure, that went, this is yours to do. And so, yeah, that's what compelled me to go forward. So I went to seminary and then came out of seminary and started a church and had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had no business background.
Yeah.
I didn't know things like, strategic planning and all of that were foreign concepts to me that I learned very quickly. But I did have the gift of surrounding myself with really good people who knew the things that I didn't and taught me well. And then some of it was just learning by fire.
What were some of the ways you went about kind of learning how to be a better leader of a brand new church and kind of, obviously being kind of the CEO, president of that church?
Well, some of it was by failing for sure. I had an initial board that I had eventually two people leave because they didn't like the way that we were operating. And so some of it was, a lot of reflection, a lot of learning about myself and what leadership looked like because I had been a charge nurse, but I hadn't really had a lot of formal leadership experience. And so that was part of it. Again, I surrounded myself with people who had a lot of knowledge in various areas like finance and strategy and learned from them and did a lot of study, a lot of podcasts, a lot of reading books, a lot of classes and things like that. But yeah, it's not something that you get in seminary. You don't get a lot of business training, so
Right.
it was learning by fire a lot of the time.
Yeah. Any books that you recall that you would recommend to people in your situation?
Mm. Gosh, I probably have a bunch of them here on my shelf. I think the Leadership Challenge was a one that I embraced early on. I also loved later on Dare to Lead by Brene Brown because she, to me, brings sort of my world of deeper thinking about things, positive psychology and leadership all together. And so, and that idea of authenticity. So that's one of my favorites still to this day.
At one point, did you decide, okay, I've kind of fulfilled this childhood dream of being leader of a ministry and a church? And I know you did some work with Unity Worldwide, also
Mhm.
the I'll say their corporate headquarters.
Yeah.
But what was that kind of the journey there to kind of the leadership coaching that you started in '08?
Yeah, so I became a part of the worldwide organization, and my main job there was to support ministers, boards, leaders out in the field. And so I had a colleague and I worked to create an organizational model based on Ken Wilber's work of integrative leadership. And we applied that to ministries. And so I would go out and do trainings with boards and things like that. And then that's when I started coaching. So I became certified as a coach and worked with ministers one-on-one on what does effective leadership look like and really loved that work and ended up then going back to Children's Mercy where I had started as a nurse. So it was kind of a full circle moment and became part of the organizational development department and served there for 10 years. I helped started the internal leadership and executive coaching program. So we eventually had over 25 coaches across the organization, clinicians, non-clinicians, et cetera. So I mentored them, oversaw that program. We started a leadership institute. So the CEO at the time invited me to be part of a small group that really began looking at what the Berry Institute could be, which now exists. Started a leadership conference annually and then left there, about a year and a half ago to start my own business.
I know you certified in Strength Finders, as we discussed, and Enneagram and things like that. How do you use the different assessments? And do you believe that more is better, or I mean, I'm a big Strength Finders fan, but I've done Working Genius and Myers Briggs and
Sure. Yeah.
Strong Interest Disc.
Yeah.
Been assessed to death, really.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think assessments are fantastic way to get a basic foundation sometimes. But yes, we can get assessed to death. And then we can start labeling ourselves as, I'm a 4, I'm a this or whatever. And then we start labeling other people, and we don't want to go there. But yeah, the thing I like about Strength Finders, and I do that as a basic assessment with a lot of my coaching, is because it comes from this idea that we do have these innate strengths. And that's where, when we're operating from our area of strength, we can have the greatest impact. And I think too often, especially high achievers, they focus on their weaknesses and how can I improve those? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of a waste of energy when we have people around us that have other strengths than we do. And I think the biggest way to come to collaborations and collaborative partnerships is to think about what are the strengths I bring to the table versus, the members of my team or my partners in the organization. So I love doing team debriefs with Clifton Strength, because then you get to see, where are the team strengths as a whole? Where are the gaps? How can we fill those? What strengths do you have that I don't? And so that colleague that maybe you've had some tension with, all of a sudden you look at and go, wow, I could really use their perspective because they have completely different strengths than I do. Maybe we could work together on something. So I think it's a really positive foundation to focus on where can we have the most impact, and not so much focus on what are my gaps or weaknesses. We do some of that work, but, Clifton always says that you should be doing 80% of your work within your zone of strengths. And so, there's always going to be the 20% where we're doing things that are maybe not our most fulfilling parts of our work. But if we're doing 80% within that zone of strength, then we're probably having the most impact that we can have.
And is the zone of strengths kind of the top 10 strengths you have, or what?
Yeah. I mean, we generally look at top 5, but Clifton says, they've studied a lot of people over time as they've taken it again years later. And they say our top 5 generally stays in our top 10 throughout our life. So it can flip the order based on situations, the work we're doing, et cetera, life experiences. But generally it stays in the top 10. So to focus on the top 10, you can generally find out what are people's innate abilities and where they can have an impact.
Yeah, that was definitely the case for me. I think I've taken it 3 times, and my top 5 kind of, some stayed, but some went in and out from the top 10 into the 5.
Yeah.
So interesting. What I know a lot of people that go out on their own, one of the kind of challenges is, they never had to get their own business. What was that process like for you to find clients that you knew you can help?
Well, it's still a process, but I came out of healthcare and wanted to diversify my coaching, and was fortunate to have relationships with different firms and consulting companies that I had worked with and outsourced some coaching to. So I signed on right away with a number of them. And then come fall was like, okay, no one has been coming my way through these avenues. And so it caused me to kind of redirect my focus. And that's when I ended up writing my book. I thought, I've had this in my mind for about 10 years. I have this space right now. This is what I'm supposed to do. So I did a lot of just introspection and started writing. And once I did, I was really driven and compelled to get it out there. And, the world has changed rapidly in the last, a little over a year since I started writing it, finished it last March and gave it to my publisher. And so I think in the process, I realized, now is the time that, this has been working for me for 10 years, but now is the time to get this out there. And so it was really a gift. And once I released that, then suddenly the coaching relationships, which I had some throughout, but that began to really be more of my focus, because I felt like, okay, I've done that. And now it's time to focus on really helping people one-on-one through some of the process that I write about.
Yeah. I have not read your entire book, but Just from my own journey, I'll say from kind of what I was doing for so long in corporate America to what I'm doing now. But, talk about kind of how you transform people, because I think, and you touched on it earlier a little bit, that, people are doing things that they need to do, right? So
Mm,
they lose a job and they have bills and kids and, mortgages and, obligations, and so they get another job. But at some point, and I'll speak personally, that that's not the path for them anymore. They're not,
mm,
maybe corporate America is not aligned with where they should be in their
yeah.
life and what they're destined to be. But talk about that with your clients as well as your own experience, and as it relates to your book, the Phoenix Effect.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jeff. I've been sitting with this idea that keeps coming up of disruptors. And often, in order for us to change a path or a way of doing things, we have some kind of disruptor that compels us to do that. Too often those things are negative. Like we lose a job, we go through a divorce, corporate downsizing, whatever it is that causes a disruption in our life. Sometimes it's burnout. And so we begin to ask those questions. And so I started sitting with the idea of what would a positive disruptor be? What if I chose a disruption? And what would that look like? And so part of the process I take people through is looking at, how have you defined yourself? What are the influences that have made you create an image of yourself? The beginning of the book, I tell a story of my son, Drew, who was in a play in high school, and it was a very intense topic. It was Dead Man Walking. So if you've seen the movie, it's a very intense subject matter. And my son was playing a boy who was murdered. I was sitting in front of the mom whose son was playing the murderer. And so we come out of this thing just emotionally drained. And, of course, we're relating to the characters because there are boys playing them. And so it was a whole thing. And we come around the corner, and in the hallway is our boys at the end of it, high-fiving each other, getting flowers from girls. I mean, they're not in any kind of emotional intensity. They're just having a blast and thinking they're all that because they've just killed it. I had a moment where I stopped and I'm like, wow, what if we could step into the hallway of our life? What if we could look at our life as kind of this ongoing narrative that we've been a part of and begin to examine, like, what has shaped this character? Where is this character going? What are the influences? What motivates it? What are the other characters shaping this role that I'm playing? And are these characters supportive of the direction I want to go, or is it time to write a couple of them out? So I take people through a process of really looking at the influences in their life, from family patterns to where they were born to media influences and all of that. And the book gives people an opportunity to break those down and look at what feels really authentic and what part of it maybe helped me get to a certain point in my life or my career, or maybe even helped me survive. But that's not the story I want to keep writing. And what part of it was bullshit to begin with, and it's time to let it go. And it was, based on something a teacher said or a preacher said or my parents said or whatever about what I'm good at, what I'm not, etc. And it's time to move forward in a different direction and really feel empowered to write the next chapter of my life and begin to open to what that looks like.
There's a great book, Never Play It Safe, by Chase Jarvis. I think we might have talked about it. For, definitely the baby boomer generation, and, people born, in the late 60s, 70s, definitely, you had a path, right? You went to high school, you went to college,
Right.
you got a job, you got married, you bought a house, you had kids, and it was like it was a very linear path. And I think what we're seeing now is it's not a linear path anymore.
Yeah.
The pace of change, corporate America is in a state of flux, and not knowing, how to lead people, really, most companies. I mean, obviously you have great companies out there that are examples, but it's just a difficult time, and people have lost the sense of kind of relationships, and everything's being automated, and we get 60 to 80,000 thoughts and impressions per day, and we have Slack and we have text, so it's
it's just a really interesting time. And I think the work you're doing, as well as your book, is a way to kind of get to your authentic purpose and self in some way or form. Because the beauty of today's world too is there's a lot of different ways to make money, and there's so much information at everybody's fingertips. Derek Sivers, he was an entrepreneur, author, former clown, I think, but made a lot of money in the internet boom days. But he said, like everybody should be, multimillionaire and have 6-pack abs, because all the information's out there on how to do it. Now, yeah. I have neither, but the information is out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting time, and obviously my book is based on the story of the phoenix, which ends up, building a nest and warming the nest until it sets itself on fire and becomes ashes. And so I feel like we are in the fire right now. We are in the fire in our world and in our lives in a lot of ways. And I was having a conversation about change, and they were asking me, how do you get through the messy middle and get to the other side? And I said, if we're changing, if we're evolving, we're always going to be in the messy middle in some part of our life. That's just the reality. And we are in the messy middle right now of change. And so how do you become comfortable with discomfort? How do you become comfortable with not having all the answers? And I have a whole section on the void, because it's that I once did a talk called Hell in the Hallway, where one door closes and the other hasn't opened yet. And you're hanging out there going, where the hell am I supposed to go? And it's a really uncomfortable place to be. And because we're uncomfortable, we often reach for the next thing that makes us feel good or seems like an answer. So the next job, the next relationship, whatever, let me just get out of this discomfort. And then we end up making the same mistakes, or ending up in situations where we're not happy or fulfilled. So how can we give ourselves some space to be in the discomfort of, I don't have the answers right now, and let that be okay and sit with that? Because if we can stay there, and if we can do some discernment in that space, and that's part of what I do as a coach, is help people live in that for a little bit. It's not forever, but if I can stay in that place is also a place of creativity and all possibility, because you haven't opened another door yet. So anything is possible. All doors are before you. So how can you sit in that place of discomfort and of not knowing and not having a specific direction, and listen and see what rises up? And that's part of the process of, using discernment to really look at, where's my next move? I'm a big fan of Ikigai. I don't know if you're familiar with that model, but
Japanese. Yeah. Explain it though. I'm pretty sure I can get the 4 or 5 circles, but I'm sure you know them by heart.
Yeah. It's actually my son Austin turned me on to this many years ago. He's traveled to Japan a number of times and is just really connected to that culture, and so he introduced me to it a long time ago. And Ikigai is a Japanese term for reason for being. It really is a great model for looking at, how do I live out my purpose? Because they say it's a combination of what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs. So what's your contribution? How can you have an impact on the world, and what you can get paid for? And so it looks at, sometimes we're like, I'm good at this, I can get paid for it, I'm going to do it. And sometimes we've been validated in our life for, oh, you're really good at this, you should go this direction. Well, you may be good at it, but are you passionate about it? Is it what you love?
Right.
Does it fulfill you? Is it something that's having a positive impact on the world? And then on the other side, there are also people, I'm an artist. And so I move in the art communities that are doing what they're passionate about and contributing to the world, but they're not charging any money, or they're not making any money. And so they aren't able to sustain themselves. So I love that model, because it really asks those four questions that help you look at, when all of those come together, then your purpose is really lived out.
Go back to the messy middle. I think,
Mm.
there's so many people, if you ask them how they're doing, they say, oh, I'm so busy, so busy. And I'm always like, oh my God, if I hear one more person saying they're busy, I mean, unfortunately, it's like a badge of honor. And we want to be busy. Like if you're not busy, you feel like you're not being, I'm not going to even say productive, because being busy doesn't equate to being productive.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you have to be busy, else you somehow are falling lower in the kind of being human, or whatever it is. Where Ryan Holiday said, we're human beings,
Right.
not doings. We're
Right.
not human doings. So and I have struggled with that. Like when I lost. When I got riffed during COVID at United Way, I was like, I got to find another job. I was like, I felt like every moment I had to be productive, and hack this, hack that, and it's just there's seasons, and it's that being in the hell in the hallway, right? That door is not ready to open, because you might not be ready, and you think you want to go to the door or another door or whatever it is, but the door that's going to open is the one that should open, and you need to wait in the messiness or discomfort and be comfortable with it.
It's a tough place to hang out when you don't have the
Yeah.
answers that you want to have. And yet,
Yeah.
like I said, that's the place where creativity really has an opportunity to kick in and rise up and help you think in ways that maybe consider things that you never considered before. And
Yeah.
so keeping from just making the next move, we're so validated for accomplishment and so validated for being busy. And yet, are we really contributing our best self to our work, to the people around us, when we're not taking time to pause and take care of ourselves and do the things outside of our work that fulfill us and build the relationships around us?
Yeah, 100%. And I think also people think, oh, I can't do something like take a walk because I got to get this done. But what people don't understand, doing something you love, or moving,
Mhm.
all the Stoic philosophers, and they took walks, because you get your best ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
Every corporation should put in showers, not communal, but private, because you get your best ideas. Because why? Because you're relaxed.
Yeah.
And if you go on a walk and just be, I love podcasts and I listen to podcasts, but sometimes just go for a walk and just observe and be present, and you'll get ideas. Like, I don't know how many ideas I've gotten on, when I used to run or on walks. It's because if you're doing something you love, or that you need, because you can't just work 24 hours a day,
Mhm.
you're going to do things faster. You're going to get better ideas. So you're going to ultimately, you will be more productive
Yeah.
if you do take time for yourself, because you can't just grind all the time.
Yeah, I was speaking at the Chautauqua Institute in New York, and I got to spend some time with Chris Hayes, who has a news program, and he's written a book called Siren, and he really talked about how our attention is the commodity of the future, and that he challenged people to just take 20 minutes a day to be with their own thoughts, and they could be walking, they could be doing, I've recently gotten into pottery. So for me, it's that, molding things with clay. I have this time to just free my thoughts. But he said, just do something where 20 minutes a day you're with your own thoughts. And that, he said, it's like we have, when you go to Vegas and you walk into a casino and there's slot machines going off everywhere and everything demanding your attention. He said, we're basically walking around with a slot machine in our pocket every day with our phones. And so there's always, emails and texts and things grabbing our attention. And he said, we've got to have time where we're just with our own thoughts, and that our energy and attention and presence is really the commodity of the future. And it's interesting. I was at the International Coaching Federation conference, and they had a futurist on staff that was talking about future trends. And she was inviting us to look at kind of the subtle cues of things that are unfolding in our world that may indicate something happening. And one of the examples she gave was that a lot of the Gen Z people that are coming up are now taking days where they are electronic free for the day. My partner was just telling me that he was reading an article about how people are creating rooms in their house that are electronic free. And so that is a trend that indicates, wow, we're really missing contact with ourselves, with other people. Gen Z has gone through COVID where they were able to connect with their friends through, social media, through texting, et cetera. And so they had that connection, but they were depressed and they were anxious because they didn't get to hang out with their friends. And so they are really valuing the human connection. And so I think as we look at AI and all the things that are coming down the road, that human connection and that need to unplug and just be with ourselves, be with other people, nurture those relationships is more valuable than ever. And we can't do that if we're busy all the time.
Food manufacturers are making, stuff that, basically our body will crave, whether it's good or bad for you.
Right.
Every, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it's supposed to, stimulate the hormone to make you want to stay, dopamine or whatever it is. And you're the product. If you're not paying for a platform like Instagram or anything like that, you are the product of those social media platforms, because it's paid advertising. So they want you to stay as long as possible on those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And that's what he was saying. He said, I'm in the business of getting people's attention. And he said, I have to do that. But once I do that, then I want to go into depth with some of these, subjects and inform people and have real conversations.
Sure. You talked about giving that speech when you started this topic. Talk about your public speaking career, how you morphed from the 5-minute Martin Luther King tribute or whatever you did to obviously going on stage and getting paid for it.
Yeah. Well, I became a preacher, and so I was speaking every Sunday.
Right.
So that certainly helped hone my skill. And so I think my message just became broader, throughout my life, and as I've come into my own business and speak to different groups, the basis is still there of the foundation of what drives, I think, good, effective leadership. But it's, a little bit different context than it was in the past.
When I worked in corporate America, I gave a lot of public speak, or not public, but within the company, but did a lot of presentations and things like that. But obviously to become a paid speaker, it's a different process and journey. So what was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, it's really looking for opportunities of where can I be in service, where can I connect, what is my particular life and work experiences, where can those be most effective. And so I do a lot of speaking to women's groups, women in leadership. I also talk a lot to healthcare leaders and how to, really take the heaviness of the work that they do, allow, again, some space for themselves, some space to process that, at least, so that they can be effective in leading others who are also in that space and also experiencing that. So I think it's really looking at where you can make a contribution, what groups really are going to benefit from the experience that you have, and seeking those out.
To go back to your book, Robin, the Phoenix Effect, what was your writing process like, and
Mhm.
what was it easy for you?
I would say that the writing part of it was the easy part. Communication is also one of my top Clifton strengths. So whether that be speaking, writing, conversations, coaching, that is definitely something that is like breathing to me, the need to communicate. And so, once I started writing, I felt like I just felt really driven to just write and write and write. And then I would go back and read, and I would often read it out loud to see, does this flow? Does this connect? There were times I took whole chapters out, which killed me. It's like, oh, I spent all this time writing this, but I'm like, this doesn't belong here. And for me, I had the person in mind who was going to pick up my book and benefit from it. And that's really what drove me. I was writing to that person and saying, what does this person need to hear? And I think the balance of my background brings a certain permission that I give to people, whether that be through my book or through coaching. As a nurse, I developed a deep empathy for the human experience. And, it is messy. I went to a lot of deliveries, and birthing something is a messy process and yet beautiful at the same time. So I really try to give people permission to be human and to hold their humanity in a place of self-compassion and gentleness, and their human experience. At the same time, I'm a possibility thinker. And what I do is I see the potential in people and I help draw that out as a coach. And so that is a deeper place within us where we do have the wisdom, the potential, the knowledge, the understanding to move us forward. Sometimes we just need someone to help see that and reflect that. And so, how can we hold both of those things in our hands at the same time, where I can say, wow, I did not show up as my best today. I'm having a rough day and that conversation didn't go well, and not let that define me, but be defined by that deeper part of me that is connectedness, that is a desire to make a difference and have an impact. And how can we hold both of those things at the same time? So that's the
Yeah.
permission I try to give people.
Yeah, I mean, I learned later on in my leadership journey for leading teams was it's okay that I only had 3 hours of sleep last night because my dog got up in the middle of the night, or
Mhm.
was there was an emergency phone call from a family member, because you're at work, and so you're not, your best is always relative. So
Yeah.
I show up as my best self that day, but my best self is not the same best self if I got 8 hours of
Right.
sound sleep and
Right.
did a workout in the morning and yada yada.
Yeah.
Right. So it's okay to let people know. I remember being in meetings and I'm like, I'm just going to say I am not a 100% cognitive level today because
Yeah.
I've got 3 hours of sleep, but
Yeah.
I just want to let you know that it's all, it's all good, because then it helps, gives them permission. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
word to say, oh, well, Jeff's human, like I, I'm going to have days like this too. So I think it just helps everybody be comfortable with, hey, our best is relative. We have to recognize that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's authentic. And I think that's one
yeah,
of the blessings of COVID is it took us into our homes, into our experience, into
yeah,
moments of, where we were sick or our kids were home or whatever. It gave us permission to integrate our humanity more into our work and to be whole people. When we look at effective leadership, what we know about great leaders is they're not the ones with the highest IQ or necessarily the biggest achievement. They're the ones that can reset. And so if you think about, yeah, you've had a bad morning, like you were talking about, and maybe your alarm didn't go off and you tripped over the dog and you got out to your car and forgot that you were out of gas and you get to a meeting late or whatever. And somebody's like, how are you doing? You're like, I'm having a bad day. Well, are you having a bad day or did you have a bad morning?
right,
We
right.
often define ourselves by those moments where, wow, I completely tanked that presentation. I suck as a leader or whatever. And then we start to define ourselves by those moments. And good leaders will reset. So, what is your ability to reset? How do you do that? How do you come back to center and go, yeah, that didn't work? And when we talk about growth mindset, that's what it's about, is going, okay, I acknowledge that I did not show up as my best here, but I'm not going to let that define who I am. I'm going to learn from that moment. I'm going to make, say I'm apologize if I need to, or set the course straight, but I'm going to move forward from this knowing who I am. And it's not that was a moment. So I think that's
Yeah.
important as human beings. I think it's important as leaders.
I love that you kind of set up a persona of the person that you can help with your book. So what are the characteristics of that person?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work with people who are wanting to gain self awareness, gain knowledge about how to be a more effective human, more effective leader at depth, who are willing to really go there. We can talk strategy, we can talk succession planning, we can talk about those, more surface things for sure. But leadership is about relationship, and it's relationship with ourselves. Are we coming from an authentic place? Are we being true to who we are in our style of leadership? Are we using our strengths to the greatest impact and ability that we have? It's about relationship I have with my colleagues and my team members. Am I empowering those who report to me, really understanding what makes them thrive, how I can empower them? My relationship to the organization. What is my role in advancing, the organizational strategy? How can I have the greatest impact? So for me, it's looking at, where are you at with those relationships? Where are you having challenges? Where can you have a bigger impact? Where can you be more effective? And really looking at depth at those kind of things.
I love that because I think you're right. It's about it. I mean, life is about relationships, not only leadership, right? And
Yeah.
it's really caring for the people that you work with, and understanding them as they are as a person, not what they can do for you from a business objective perspective.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's that idea of servant leadership,
sure.
and I want to use my time and energy to be more effective. And so I want to work with the people who I can contribute the most to, and impact the most, for sure. We're going to get real. I think authenticity is the key to being effective in life and in all relationships.
You talk a lot about self-awareness as the key, but
Mhm.
kind of go deeper on self-awareness for a leader.
Yeah, I say self-awareness is our superpower. It's that emotional intelligence piece. So that idea of holding our humanity, I'm going to react to things. There are things that are going to happen that I am going to react to, that bring up things for me, that trigger me, whatever. Can I in the moment go, "Oh, wow, look at that, Robin. You're having, you're having a reaction here. Maybe take a beat and take a breath and think about how you can respond rather than react." And so it's learning to give yourself the space to react in a safe way. So maybe I close the office door and scream, or whatever I need to do. Call up somebody, call up a mentor, a friend, a coach, whatever, and say, this has happened and I need to just talk it through. Give myself permission to be human, but at the same time, take a beat and learn to respond to situations rather than react. And it may mean I say in the moment, I'm having a reaction to this, but I really want to sit with it and discern what that's about, and let me talk with you tomorrow, so I can give you a better response to this thing that you just proposed, or this feedback you just gave me.
I know you just published. I think it was published in July 2025. Your book. You have a second book in you.
Yeah, I do. It's it's working. It's working in me right now. So there's a couple things, I'm really sitting with the whole model of ikigai and how we live out our purpose. This first book was really about getting to the heart of your authentic self. This next book feels like, now how do I live that out through my work? How do I have an impact in the world in the midst of this change and chaos that we're experiencing? So, yeah.
I did see. I'm going to pivot to your painting. How long have you been doing it? I've also heard that there are times to get inspiration. You'll go to Italy or France or
Yeah.
Portugal to get inspiration. So talk about that.
Yeah. Well, my mom was a painter. So I grew up with art. And that's one of those things that I inherited that felt really authentic to me. As I talk about, those things that we absorb from our family, that's one that I felt like, yeah, that lives in me. So my mom would never allow me to have coloring books because she didn't want me coloring in the lines. She wanted me to learn to express myself in a more creative way and a more organic way. So I guess that's part of my foundation of learning to color outside the lines, right? But so art is my therapy. Art is my place where I ground. I can just sit at my art desk at the end of the day sometimes and just doodle, and that will help free my mind, help me release the day, help me just relax. And so I've been a lifelong painter. And yeah, I belong to a group that we travel internationally and we paint in different places. So I've been to France a couple times, love France, southwest France. I've been to Portugal. We're going to the Cotswolds this year to experience that area. So yeah, I've made some really amazing friends that way, and experienced other cultures through the lens of art and creativity.
Robin, there's two groups I love helping with great advice from people like yourself. One's that recent college graduate or even high school graduate these days, and they're taking that first step into a professional career. What advice would you have for them to obtain that first job and starting their career?
I mean, I think through those questions that I asked about, first of all, what am I good at? What am I skilled at? What are my talents? What are my gifts? What lights me up? What am I passionate about? Where can I have the biggest impact in the world? Where can I make a positive contribution in a company, in an organization, in the work that I do? And then what can I get paid for? So I think, oftentimes we start out with what I can get paid for and and what I'm skilled at. Um, and that's okay. Sometimes we need to feed ourselves, but at least if you can choose something that begins to nurture those passions that you really have, that will help get you on the path towards that 80% of operating from your strengths and the things that you want to, that really fulfill you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I love that advice. I think I'm going to know that where you're going to go on your answers to this next question, but everyone could be a leader at a company, whether you have people in an org chart underneath you or not. But those that do want to take that step to be a manager, a first-time manager, and be responsible for a group of people, what advice do you have for them as they begin that type of leadership journey?
Yeah. I mean, certainly become that person before you get there, is always my advice. So, how can you begin to embody leadership presence? How can you begin to learn management skills? What are the things, that ideal next step for you? Study it. Meet with people who are in that next step. Say, what did you do to prepare yourself? I'm a big believer in informational interviews. So if you see somebody doing something interesting, I've never had a leader or never coached anyone who approached leaders that said, no, I'm not going to meet with you. If you, approach someone and say, I'm really intrigued by what you do and I want to know more about your story, how you got there. People love to talk about themselves. I've never had one say no. So, and that's really how I got into kind of what I'm doing too. I met with a chief innovation officer and at Children's Mercy, had no idea like just how busy he was and what I was asking of him. But I said, hey, can I get an understanding of the organization as a whole and where I might have an impact? And he gave me 45 minutes of his time and really sat and asked me questions. And that's how I ended up where I landed at Mercy. So I think, seek out those that are doing what you want to do and gain knowledge from them. Learn what their process is, and then take that in and say, what's mine to, how can I develop myself in that way?
I love that advice. I've interviewed, I don't know, almost close to 200 people, but I love the, before you even get there, prep yourself. So
Right.
I don't know if anyone else has given that advice. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Robin,
Preparation
thanks
meets
so much.
opportunity, right?
That's right. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yep.
I love the definition of luck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm grateful that you reached out to me, and I'm glad we will become friends, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's been great to be with you, and thank you for what you're doing. I think things like this, conversations like this, are so important as we, try to become more effective and impactful ourselves. So I appreciate you.
Well, Joe, I'm not sure. I can't fact check this, but at least admittedly, this is the first Corporate Couch guest that's been to a nude beach.
No
as far
kidding.
As we know.
When
So,
that was something. It just
Yeah,
kind of came out of the blue,
yeah. If I went to a nude beach, I'd be naked, and everyone else would be afraid.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
There you go. It was just fascinating to me, her career. NICU nurse. She's a minister, works for one of the largest non-denominational churches in the country. And then there's a leadership coach, executive coach, keynote speaker, author, talked about her book.
She's the full package. I think that's what you said. An art,
Yeah, I mean, it's a
painter,
renaissance.
pottery.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many good things. The hell in the hallway quote, like, people, executives, when one door closes and the next hasn't opened yet, leaders find themselves uncomfortable in the in-between. I definitely have felt that many times in my career. And you have to learn to sit with uncertainty, discern things rather than just react to them, and allow your creativity to surface and be okay in the in-between and surrender to it and know the door is going to open, and it's not you to determine when that's going to open. And you know me, if I ask you how you're doing, Joe, and you're not one of these people, and you say, well, I'm really busy. I hate that. It's terrible. It's like, you're busy. It's a badge of honor, whatever. Like, everybody's busy. And she talked about it. I love it. It's not a badge of honor. Creativity lies in the pause. You can't respond to emails all day and text people or whatever you're doing. You have to sit with what you're working on and work and do deep work. When you're creating Corporate Couch podcasts and doing the editing and all that, you're not answering email. You're not texting people. You're sitting down with, or if we're creating a podcast for a client and it's the beginning stages and we're trying to think through what's the best message and music and funny lines and intros and outros for that client, we're not like fucking around with our texting or, hey, Joe, hold on, I got to answer this email. We're trying to be creative. So I really like that about her. Another guest, we had Donna Griffith a while back, that teaches Stanford MBAs how to do storytelling for their startups, because people remember stories. They don't remember a bullet on a PowerPoint. But she talked about that Japanese ikigai. So, what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And the intersection of those four circles is your ikigai. So that was fun. I enjoyed talking to her. What did you get out of the episode, Jimmy?
I'd like to remind our listeners that there is a really good Wikipedia article about ikigai. Am I saying that right now? Ikigai.
Yeah.
Ikigai, ikigai. Look up the Wikipedia article. It's a really good definition and really good chart in there and everything. I just love that concept because it gives you focus, when you're trying to come up with a conclusion of something, or when you're studying a situation or something. I feel like it always helps if you have little niches that you can put your situation in. The story in her being in NICU and being a nurse there and holding that little baby until he died, and that was her assignment for the day.
Yeah, 8 hours.
8 hours of just hanging on to that baby and rocking him and cradling him, because it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to die. And then how does she leave that? She left that with the baby was the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
I learned so much from him in the process of watching him die.
Yeah.
That's just an amazing reversal, if you will, of roles. And, if you're a person of faith like I am, and I think she is, and I think you are, she's going to meet that baby.
Yeah,
and she's going to have it, and she's going to have a chance to thank him for the lesson that he gave her. It was a great story. It's great. I loved it. It's a great interview.
Yeah. And again, everybody's career is just so zigzaggy for the most part, and I just loved her, just the transformation at each step, and it's a reminder that transformation, isn't about racing to your next job or your next door. It's about having the courage to stand in the hallway long enough to see what door is truly yours to walk through, right? And not trying to force it. So just really enjoyed talking to Robin. Joe, we're recording here on a Friday. I'm a little down. What can you do to make me laugh?
Oh, man. I got a joke that I'm actually complimenting our listeners that they are going to get this, because you've got to have a little bit of intellect to get this joke. Let me tell it to you. Doctor was diagnosing a man, and apparently this person had lost his ability to do basic math. So you'd ask him, what is 9 plus 9? And he'd say 12. Well, what is 8 plus 8? And he'd say 10. And he said, okay, that's interesting. What is 6 times 5? And the man thought about it, and he said 1E. And finally, the doctor said, I've got it figured out. Somebody has put a hex on you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.